Hey guys, J-Man here. Welcome to my video. Today we will have the very first episode of our new Japanese Music Talk podcast with my co-host Zach Reinhardt. You should know him from his YouTube channel where he reviews new Japanese music every Sunday. Maybe you want to say hi to the audience.
Hey. I'm Zach Reinhardt. I, like he said, have a YouTube channel. And I don't know, link in the description or something like that. I review Japanese music every week.
Yeah. Okay. For this episode, we are really happy to welcome our very first guest, John, from the AltIdolPodcast and the website Straight from Japan. Thanks for being with us, and maybe you want to introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi. Yep. I'm John, co-host of the aforementioned Alternative Idol podcast. I also have my own website, Straight from Japan, where I report on all the happenings in the alternative idol scene over there in Japan.
As you may have guessed, our today's topic is the alternative idol scene. And so yeah, to start things, I think we should explain the word idol group. What are idol groups and how are these groups different from conventional bands? And how did this become a thing in Japan?
Okay. Let's see. Idol groups usually. The difference between an idol group and like a band, say like Aldius or something like that, is that idols have no instruments, so they're just all vocals with stage show dancing, choreographed dancing, sometimes with a live backing band on special occasions, but mostly with pre-recorded electronic or actual musical instrument music.
Yeah. And I think another difference is also the songwriting, right? Because they often have producers who write the songs for them.
That's correct. Some of them do have producers that write all their material. Some groups actually write their own material also.
Oh, okay.
On their own. So, yeah, it's a different type of scene than your regular band, who will have like outside writers write for them and stuff.
Yeah, and so if the typical idol group then is something like your Dempagumi Inc. or your AKB48s or all these really kind of big, very poppy names, wherein lies the core difference between them and the alternative idol scene? Is it just that it's a different scene and it's kind of different people, or is there a significant difference in their approach to making their music?
Well, in reality, over in Japan, they don't actually distinguish between like traditional idols and alternative idols. It's all just idol. So if anybody goes to Japan and they start talking about alternative idols, nobody's going to know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Really, when it gets down to it, it's all pretty much the same structure. Groups, they all, certain number of girls. There's a leader of the group. They all have colors that represent them. Mm-hmm. So that's all pretty much the same. The only difference would pretty much be like an aesthetic difference, a look difference, maybe a little musical difference. Alternative, as we call them in the West, alternative idols tend to be a little heavier, a lot more guitars, and sometimes like some harsh vocals, things of this nature.
Cool.
And talking about alternative idol groups, personally, I wasn't too involved in this scene, but lately some bands really caught my attention, like Passcode or Necronomidol. And so these were kind of the starting points for me. And now it would be interesting to know, for you, John, which were the first bands which really caught your interest and what kept you so interesting in the alt idol group scene?
When I kind of had a roundabout way of getting into the whole alt idol scene. I actually had a friend who was really into anime, and I think everybody's got that friend, right?
Yeah.
Some of us are that friend.
But he was into anime, and he was really into Kiari Pamu Pamu. I'm sure that you all have heard of her.
Yes.
And so, I was like, oh, that's interesting. I'll check that out. So I listened to her. I like that. She's good. And then that kind of led into like a baby metal type situation, which happens for a lot of people, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I actually kind of took like a left turn down like the VK and J metal type route. Which then kind of circled back and kind of into alt-idol through like Necronominal and Fruit Pache and bands, groups like this. You wanted to know specifically what groups caught my attention?
Yeah, so which was your first experience, so to say? Which groups?
Well, of course, baby metal. I mean, that's like the stepping stone into alt-idol for most people, I think.
Yeah, the
a lot of people. A lot of people stop at baby metal. The more adventurous dive a little deeper, I guess. I don't know. Use that YouTube suggestions, and you'll find amazing things. But Necronominal, Passcode, Bish, those, all the really big names in the scene is really what got my attention.
Yeah. I've always been a little skeptical towards the kind of alt-idol scene, or just the idol scene in general. When I hear like, I don't know, I always kind of listen to like how they're approaching these kind of punkier sounds and stuff. And me personally, I always just think like, well, I'd rather just listen to a band generally. But what is it about the like idleness of it that you find interesting? Is it the visuals, or is it something more auditory?
Really, it's kind of a package deal. It's the music and the song, the singing, the visuals, and actually the community that goes along with it is really, it's a very good community, I guess you'd say. It's not like your typical Western metal community where it's very cliquey.
So no elitists or something like this?
Not as much. I mean, there are some, but it's not nearly as much.
So it's kind of similar to Visual K in some regard, because it's also this package of visuals, the music videos and the live performance. It all goes together. Yeah,
you know how in VK they have a lot of crowd interaction, dancing, callbacks. They have the exact same thing in Idol too.
Cool.
Okay. You already said, for many people, baby metal is the idol group which they know. But of course, I think this whole phenomenon is a bit older. There were bands before which tried something like this. And what would you say are some of the essential groups of this whole alternative idol scene? Are there any records or bands which are really standing out or are important?
Well, we've already mentioned some in passing, like Biss, who's really like, I mean, some say the originators of alternative idol, or
I've certainly heard that.
Yeah. I mean, they've been around for a while. Their kind of offshoot group or replacement group, supposed to have been their replacement group, Bish, is also another group that people should listen to if they're looking to get into the scene. They're really good. They're both produced by the same production company. Of course, Necronominal, you both are familiar with them.
Yeah.
They're a little different though, because their producer is an American guy.
Yeah.
So he's really interested in reaching out to non-Japanese fans, international fans, English-speaking fans, fans in Europe. He's really interested in reaching out to them and, kind of pulling them into the fold.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of other groups, if you're really into the hard kind of punk style, you might like Guso Drop. They're kind of crazy. A lot of gang shout type singing. Unfortunately, they just broke up, but there's a few CDs out there you can buy.
Yeah, I remember when I did my review for the Necronomaidol record, Deathless, I asked you for some recommendations, and this was one of them, and I checked them out, and I thought it was kind of interesting to listen to.
Yeah, and then kind of over towards the other end of the spectrum, more like EDM style stuff. You have your passcodes. Yeah. You have a group called Zembukimi no Seida, who are made by a production company called Kodomo Mental, who's actually a video production company that has now turned into a music production company. So their videos are really sharp, and they're more EDM oriented. I mean, they do have some guitars in there. And then you have more like emotional type groups, like a group called Yanakoto Soto Mute, and their songs elicit a lot of emotional response from the audience. They're pretty deep lyrically as well.
Are there also maybe some interesting newcomers which don't exist for long, which you may can recommend to our listeners to keep an eye on them?
Oh yeah, this is actually something that I kind of specialize in, digging up new groups, finding new groups. Some of them just seem to fall into my lap. Others, you kind of have to dig for them. But there's a group that just came out. Well, I don't know if anybody has heard of a previous group called Deep Girl.
Deep Girl,
they kind of imploded on themselves and are now gone. But one of the singers from that group is in a new group called Candy Syrup. Now this group is really new, and they're interesting because they're run by the owner of the Candy Syrup hair salons, which is where a lot of alt idols go to get their hair colored. So he wanted to put together a group, and so he did, and they're really good. And he has a lot of money, well, seemingly. So, the production is high, everything is really good. There's some other smaller groups. There's one that just came out a while ago called Schwango Bupan. Their video, they just released a video today, their first video. I think they've been around maybe 5 or 6 months, but they're looking pretty good.
Okay, maybe you can send me the title afterwards, and I will link it in the description so the viewers can also hear some music to get an idea about this whole thing.
Oh, sure, yeah, and there's a lot of other idols out there that get like almost no exposure. I mean, I know a guy that went to a show for an idol named, she calls herself Garuda, and I think there was like 5 people there.
Yeah.
She's really, really good, though. I mean, really good. I'll give you some info on her later. You can put some links and stuff. But, yeah, and then there's another group called Mistress, who's really an up-and-comer right now. They've been around for a while, but they've never really got much exposure. They do have some videos out. They have a mini album, a couple of singles. But a lot of these groups, it's hard for them to get exposure because there's so many groups in the alt scene trying to, claw their way to the top. It can be difficult for them.
I think this leads to the next question. How do you, as someone who doesn't live in Japan, how do you stay up to date with the scene? Are there any websites or communities where you can inform yourself about the new groups and new releases and stuff like this?
Well, most of the information that I get, the up-to-date information, I get off Twitter. Which is either you're going to need to know Japanese, or you're going to have to be able to utilize Google Translate or another translating piece of software and know how it mistranslates and fix it so you know what they're actually saying instead of the weirdness that sometimes gets spit out at you. You can I've got, of course, news on my site. There's another site called homicidals.com who covers a lot of alternative stuff, alternative idol, and there's also the Alternative Idol Facebook group that you can join. I think if you just search Alternative Idol.
And of course, there's this podcast I heard about.
Oh yeah, there's that too. The Alternative Idol podcast. There's some clowns doing that. I don't know. So, we got news on there too.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing for me. I cover a lot of the punk and indie rock scene. And yeah, I just follow a ton of bands on Twitter, follow labels on Twitter, and that is where I get a ton of my information.
Yeah, Japan seems to be very Twitter centric. They don't do the Facebook. They like Twitter.
It's fine by me.
In general, it's a horror. Look, if you want to discover some new bands, you always check Spotify, don't find them there. You check Bandcamp, don't find them there. It's always hard to really get inside the scene and really listen to the music.
Yeah, I've had to actually contact bands on Twitter and stuff. Hey, can you send me your new EP or can you mail that to me?
Well, a lot of the idol groups it seems like they don't want you to know anything. Yeah, they say, hey, we're a new group, blah, 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 and we're going to be doing our first show this day. And I'll be like, what's your musical style?
Yeah.
How many girls are in your unit? Basic information, please. But yeah. And another thing about the Twitter is they will actually reply to you for the most part, all the individual idols. So, which is nice. Unless their management company has barred them from communicating with fans, which happens sometimes.
Yeah.
It's a question if this is a general thing for Japanese bands, because also on my Twitter and on my Reddit page, I always share links of new music videos, and sometimes I just post a link the band in there, and they write a message like, thank you so much, or stuff like this, and they are really happy about getting this exposure.
Yeah, they're always, it's like they're amazed that somebody outside of, their 10-block neighborhood knows who they are. They're like, how do you know about us? Oh, I saw it on Twitter, or I saw it on the YouTube.
Yeah, I get responses from bands all the time for my reviews or something. I've actually met some really, really cool people that I keep up with today just by reviewing their band or something.
And I'm sure that we all have our little insiders that feed us information that we've met through Twitter and stuff too.
Yeah, I know a few people.
Yeah, but I want to talk about the music again. I said many stuff isn't available in digital form. So if you want to actually buy the CDs, you have to import them. And there's the questions. Are there any online shops or something for idol groups where you can order this stuff apart from the big sellers like CD Japan or Yes Asia? For example, here in Germany, we have a really niche market for Visual K. We have some online shops like Neo Tokyo or Mi Shop, which sell CDs and merchandise. We also have some record companies like JPU Records or Genshin, which distribute Japanese CDs to the European market. And is there anything comparable for the idol scene, or is it really you have to get in there and order directly from Japan?
Yeah, you have to. There's no labels outside of Japan really releasing any idol music, except for specific records out of France. They have pressed a couple releases. I know they pressed a couple of Biscaiden records, and Necronominal Nemesis they put out on vinyl as well.
Oh yeah.
But other than them, no. You just got to jump in the trenches. You got to get your proxy buyer so that you can buy from stores in Japan or directly from the idol's own websites. A lot of them do have their own sites where they sell stuff directly to Japanese people, so you had to use a proxy. There are a couple. Passcode has an international shop. Bish has an international shop. Necronominal, of course, has an international shop. There's not many.
Bandcamp.
Yeah, they're on the Bandcamp. There's not many that do, though, because most of them think that there's no interest outside of Japan, so why should they, set up an international store?
Yeah, that seems to be the case a lot of the times. I find there's a kind of insular attitude, not out of like any sort of distaste or dislike of like international exposure, but yeah, a lot of bands just don't expect it and are really surprised to see anybody overseas, especially in an English language or something, covering it.
Yeah. One resource that I didn't mention, when most proxy companies are linked to Yahoo Auctions, which is a really good place to pick stuff up.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pick stuff up for like less than MSRP or manufactured price, which is nice.
But the problem is you have to pay the proxy seller, then you have to pay the shipping.
So. There is that.
Are they on Amazon much? I often order stuff from like Amazon.co.jp and have it shipped over.
Yeah, a lot of groups do sell stuff on Amazon, or there are storefronts on Amazon that do sell things. I know that they send stuff to Europe and stuff. I guess they're sending stuff to the States now.
From Amazon.co.jp?
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely do. I use them all the time.
Okay. Yeah, well, the first time I checked was quite some time ago, and I don't think they were at that point.
Yeah, it depends. Like, sometimes there will be an item that, like, it specifically says, like, we don't ship this internationally for some reason. But most things that I've tried to buy, at least, have been able to ship over.
Talking about the sales. Now, I ask myself, I wasn't in Japan, I didn't visit the shows, but is it generally more an underground thing, these alternative idols scene, with smaller concerts, limited record releases? I mean, if you compare something like Fruit Pochette or Necronominal to the old idol groups like Morning Musume or Momohiro Clover Z, it doesn't really compare. And so on the other hand, lately you got bands like Baby Metal or the idol formerly known as Lady Baby got some mainstream success, and they even got overseas attention. And I think that's a whole debate. Underground versus mainstream. Can you be an alternative idol group with huge sales, or?
That's a good question. And we joke about that a lot. Like groups like Bish, Biss, Passcode, they're all on major labels now. I mean, Passcode's on Universal, Biss is on Nippon Crown, which is another big label over there. Bish is on Avex, which is also another big label.
Very huge, yeah.
Yeah, and Baby Metal is, of course, on a big label. Are they still alternative? Yes. They started as alternative. You kind of, I guess, stay in an alternative vein, even though you have graduated up to a bigger label. It doesn't change, for the most part, the music that you're producing, the aesthetic that you're putting forward.
So you'd say that they're still, like because of their sound, like somebody like Bish, who is very poppy and very, very big, but also has that kind of punky, noisy edge. You'd say they are still alt idol, despite being like not really part of a scene per se. They're kind of divorced from the smaller groups to some degree.
Yeah, to some degree they are kind of divorced from those smaller groups now. I'm sure that given the chance, they'd still play small venues if they could, and mix it up with the smaller groups because kind of getting back to your roots thing. But then again, I guess once you get a taste of playing the big ones, why would you want to go back? And a lot of these underground type idols and the ones that are now on major labels, still the lyrical content and stuff for some of them is still questionable for a mainstream audience, I guess you'd say. It's a little spicy sometimes.
Yeah.
Or just sometimes downright filthy. Really? Yeah.
Well,
I saw a music video. I'm not sure from which group it was. Was it Deep Girl or something? Where they had the topic of bullying, so in school, and driving someone to suicide. And I think such themes don't really attend in the mainstream or are intended.
No, and that's a really good video as well. I mean, it's well produced. The song is good. And I think it kind of spreads a positive message. More groups should do more songs, talking about issues like that. But the mainstream, of course, is not going to do that because that's not really going to make money.
Yeah.
So you had to leave it to smaller groups, kind of like in punk music, like thrash metal music. The more political groups, they don't get the traction, but they're the ones, talking about the stuff.
yeah.
So I guess it's kind of a toss-up. Do you want to, talk about issues and, put forward stuff like that, or do you want to make money?
Yeah. Talking about these topics, I think we already talked a little bit about this, but I really want to make another point about the visuals of this whole thing. We only talked about the music. How important are the looks and the aesthetics in idol groups? I think some are still, beside having a heavier sound or something, they still have this rather cute or girly image, but there are also some exceptions. So how important are the visuals in this whole thing?
Well, the visuals are pretty important, I think. It's part of the whole package. There's some groups out there that kind of use they call it yami kawaii, which loosely translate as sick cute, which kind of denotes sort of like a mental illness type thing or a physical illness look where you're very pale. You'll see the red blush on the cheeks to all the way up under the eyes to make you look like you're sick. Thin, emaciated look. And it goes along with the lyrical content. It goes along with, the whole image they're trying to portray. And usually, the issues that they're talking about in their music. There's other types of groups more to the EDM side that are like Cyber or BPM Ichigo Q, groups like this that wear brighter colors. They're more Yume Kawaii, which means dream cute. So, they're pastel-y, they're bright, they're fluffy and happy. Mm-hmm. And, this type of deal. Then you've got your more like idol rock or idol metal groups, like, I don't know, I'll bring up some that I haven't brought up, like Broken by the Scream. Kind of at a loss here. Mistress.
Yeah.
They'll wear like black, dark colors. Sometimes they'll, it'll be leather, latex, it's more of like a metal or group or something like that. And usually you'll find that the outfits are themed to the current release. And when the next release comes out, they will change their outfit to reflect that release. Mm-hmm. So their outfits are constantly changing. And it can actually get irritating sometimes because they rapidly, 3 months, single comes out. 3 months later, another single comes out. Outfits change.
Yeah, but once again, we already had this comparison, but really reminds me of Visual K. There you also have these stalker groups with these black outfits and all this, and you have this brighter stuff, and always constantly making a new release, new look, new release, new look. And one thing in Visual K, which is kind of problematic, is the longevity of these bands. They are often disband within short amounts of times. And does this also happen often in the idol scene, that bands disband, change members, rename their name and stuff like this?
Oh, constantly. I mean, groups get new members leave, they just break up just all of a sudden one day for no reason. There'll just be an announcement, we broke up. Mm-hmm. I mean, you'll really be getting into a group and you'll be like, yes, this group is great. There's a group called Living Dead Idols. They released 2 singles. They had a video out, and then one day, boom, we're done. Just out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, it happens all the time. Then there's so many groups being created. It's like a new one every day. There's a new group, there's a new group, there's a new group. And yet again, there's groups that are folding every day. I mean, it's...
So there's a pretty high turnover rate, you'd say?
Yeah, there's a pretty high turnover rate. I've learned not to try to get attached to any groups, because they will end without warning. And then you'll be like, oh. So don't get too attached to idols.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about like the kind of idol rock and metal stuff and the more EDM-y groups. But I also I was recently up in Canada for the Next Music from Tokyo show.
Go check out his video.
Yeah, I made a video on it. And there was an idol rap group called Kote Camera Girl. Kote Camera Girl Dry. Would you consider like stuff like that, this kind of idol hip hop? And I know there are several groups that have kind of experimented with this. Would you consider that to be alt idol as well, or kind of alt adjacent, or?
Yeah, I say we as a collective, me and my podcast cohorts, we do consider them alt. They're definitely not in the mainstream. Kotai Camera Girl Dry. There's another rap idol group called Lyrical School, who's been around since like 2011.
Yeah.
There's another one called Rhymeberry.
I couldn't remember them.
Yeah, they definitely fit in, because they're, another one thing that I think kind of defines an alt idol group is, now a lot of people don't agree with me on this, but the size of the production company, or if there is even a production company at all. Mm-hmm. A lot of these groups are self-produced, self-managed. Some have small production companies that are like 2 or 3 groups big, and that's it. I mean, they're not a Muse. They're not a juggernaut of idol. They're just small, independent type companies.
Yeah, didn't like Bandmade and stuff start fully independent?
Bandmade, yeah, they. I actually happen to know a bit about them. They started on Platinum Passport, I believe, the same company that Passport started under. Mm-hmm. And now they have, of course, moved on to Crown.
Would you still consider them as an idol group? Because I think I read they don't really like the term and want to be seen more as a real, however you want to call it, band.
Oh, Bandmade?
Yeah.
Oh, I never actually considered them an idol group. They're just more of a J-rock.
Yeah.
To me. But yeah, I've always taken them seriously. They're very good. They can play their instruments, most of them. Miku's questionable to me. But the rest of them are, they're right up there. They're really, really good. And they're really nice ladies, too. I met them in Seattle.
Yeah, and now We didn't really talk about this so far. All the bands we mentioned so far had only female singers, right? And now is the question, is being a band of, or a group of females essential to idol groups, or would it also be possible as a boy group to be considered an idol group? Because the only example I know were Lady Bird, but they were a weird exception. And beside this, I don't really know any idol group with male singers.
Yeah, there doesn't really seem to be an alternative version of like Johnny's.
Yeah, there's as far as I'm aware, there are no alternative styled groups with male singers. There is one, I can't remember their name though. That the front man was a fella and then a bunch of girls. But yeah, there's no equivalent to like your Japanese boy bands, who some people do consider them idols as well. Like your exile tribes, groups like this, a lot of people consider them idols as well because they operate pretty much the same way as a female idol group.
Yeah, it's kind of the same machine running.
Yeah, but in alt males, no. It's pretty much all female. I mean, even you'll hear some pretty gnarly growls and death vocals, but that's all girls.
So the growling generally is, because like I often see in the videos, in like music videos, the growling looks very clearly dubbed in, and I'm always like, is that her? Or
if you do some really deep digging, you can find like on Twitter and stuff, they'll have examples of themselves, no music, just here's my cell phone and here's me doing my growls.
Yeah.
And some of the groups do use a little electronic manipulation to get just the right effect on the growls, but the bass growl is actually the girls doing it. And some of them, they get they pretty much ruin their voices doing it because they don't have the training. They don't, they're not doing it properly. So they, they sound like your, 80-year-old grandma that drinks too much whiskey and smokes 2 packs of cigarettes, and they're 20 years old and they've destroyed it already.
Of course, that's the downside.
Yeah, that is definitely a downside.
Yeah, I mean, it happens to metal bands too. But
for example, Dion Gray, I guess you're all familiar with this band. Also, their singer Kyo had multiple surgeries to his throat because he just used the wrong technique. And if it even happens to such really professional is maybe the wrong word, but these really specialized singers, of course, if you then have a young girl which tries to replicate this, it can go wrong. And yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. In the last year, there's been multiple idol singers that have had to have vocal cord polyps removed. Aina, the main girl from Bish, at the beginning of this year had a vocal cord polyp removal surgery, and
she has a hell of a voice too.
Yeah, it didn't change her voice at all. I mean, and she's probably better for it. Mashiro from Deep Girl, who is now in Cyber, also had the same surgery. And she's got one of those like anime girl voices, It's all high-pitched and sometimes irritating. It's just, sometimes it's too much. It's too sugary.
Maybe that's another question. I think generally all these girls are really young, and maybe for their career as an idol, they are forced to do too much for their age or something. Do you think this is a problem? Or also in regards of their education, some drop their education for being a singer or something like this?
Yeah, some of them do actually. They go as far as they need to go in high school, which I think is age 16 in Japan. You don't actually have to go any farther than that. And then they go full into idol. Some do both at the same time and have to stop doing idol stuff because their parents tell them they need to do school instead. But there are some that are idols which in regular idol, like AKB, the 46 groups, they're all, it's very structured and regimented. And when some of them are age 18, you're done. You graduate, right?
Yeah.
In alt, they don't do that. There's no age limit. It's a set age. The groups set the age limit. If they want to change it, they change it. I mean, like BIS, how old is poor Louis? 27? Something like that. All the original BIS girls all have their own groups now. They're all in their mid to upper 20s. You can keep going. That's one of the things that's nice about alt idol. They don't have to quit when they turn 18. They don't have to graduate.
Mm-hmm. Do you consider solo artists as also being involved? Like, would you consider Tintinko, now that she's gone solo from BIS, to still be alt idol adjacent or involved in that scene, or is she pretty much off on her own now?
I like to think that she's still an alt idol. I don't know what she thinks.
Yeah, but obviously.
I think that she's still in there. We listen to her stuff, her, Koto, Pikarin, very much so. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's single idols that definitely fit in there. So, it's not, it doesn't have to be a group. I know most idol is by definition a group activity, but I think singles can fit in there too.
Yeah, I guess also related to that, and I know Rocky has the same person in his comment section sometimes who's been pushing the gospel of Hanako-san.
Oh yes. Now she's a little different. Yeah. I see her more as a performance artist than an idol.
Yeah.
Have you seen any videos of her live performances, I like to call them?
A bit, yeah. And I also follow her on Twitter, and I see some pretty crazy pictures show up every once in a while.
she likes to dump food on people and this and that. And, it's more of a performance than an actual live concert. There's singing and stuff, but more often than not, it's going to be maybe like a 50-50 of performance art and singing.
Yeah.
There's another group that's kind of in that vein called Dots. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I have not, no.
I don't consider them idols either. I consider them performance artists. They just put out a live broadcast of their new, quote unquote, new song, which was just a camera that they had sitting outside and crickets chirping for 11 hours. Okay. Yeah. And, nobody knows what their names. They all wear these glasses things over their eyes at all times, so you don't know who they are. It's like a performance art type thing. The music's all right. They do have songs and stuff. They've released some singles. I don't consider them idols. Some people do.
Yeah. Well, it's they're kind of toying with the idol aesthetic intentionally, right? They're kind of
they're organized as an idol group, but musically it could go either way.
Mm-hmm. Maybe this leads to another question which we didn't tackle yet. When we were talking before this recording, we had the term anti-idol, and now is the question, some people say it's a thing, some it's not a thing. What do you understand under an anti-idol, or doesn't it exist in your opinion?
The anti-idol label, I think, is pretty much like a self-given type thing. Like Guso Drop, they, I believe, claimed that they were anti-idols because they're going to go out there. They're going to cause mayhem and havoc at their shows. They're screaming and yelling, jumping out in the audience, crowd surfing, this sort of stuff, which is very anti-idol. You know, you have your old Biss who's, you know, running around in the suicide forest naked for a video. You know, they're being covered with quote unquote bodily fluids. You know, it's very anti-idol, even though it is actually structured as idol. They're working as idols, but portraying an anti-idol aesthetic, I guess you'd say.
So you would refuse to call it a movement or something like this?
Yeah, there's not many out there that actually label themselves as anti-idols. And, you know, people, I guess I'll say people in the media that cover them don't use the term. We just call it alternative because us in the West have to label everything.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I definitely used to hear it more, but haven't heard it as much recently. And I definitely think alternative idol is a much better name for that kind of phenomenon, just because it isn't really inherently anti-idol.
Yeah, because, anti-idol, they wouldn't be... The way that I would think of the term is they wouldn't be using any idol structure at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it would be crush the idols, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, Biss, did have that album, Idol is Dead. They had the other one, Who Killed Idol, you know. They're dismantling the idol structure when they're actually not. You know, it's all image, really.
One thing which just came to my mind, at the beginning we were talking about the more traditional idol bands, and I wonder, from a Western perspective, would you say that the alternative idol scene may be a little bit more popular? Because, as we said, baby metal is a word everyone knows in the metal world nowadays, but these traditional idol groups nobody knows. So, would you say in the Western market it's a bigger phenomenon?
I think idol is really it's kind of a self-contained phenomenon over in the East. You know, Japan, Korea definitely has their idol scene, which is crazy in its own thing. But it's, you know, we have, you know, your boy bands, which is pretty much Western idols. You know, your Destiny's Child, which is Western idols. I mean, they don't run the same kind of structure. They're not quote unquote produced, manufactured groups. They are, but I mean, you know, they don't have the graduation turnovers. They don't have the rapid member replacements. That's really a uniquely Japanese, Korean, that area of the world type thing.
Yeah. I get the kind of impression that the West only really observes idol groups as kind of a gimmick in a lot of cases. And that's why you get like baby metal being kind of popular, because it's like, oh, look, it's these cute Japanese girls and they're making metal music. Isn't that funny? Yeah.
And then there's, you know, back home in Japan, there's 50 other groups doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
So, you know,
and better.
Yeah. And I mean, idols, they're very popular in Japan.
Yeah.
I mean, they have their own theaters. They do daily shows. You know, I think AKB48 holds the world's record for the world's largest pop group because they have so many members.
Probably. I mean, they divide it into a bunch of like subgroups and stuff, don't they?
Yeah, they've got groups all over Japan. They've got groups in other countries. Some of them are officially affiliated. Some of them aren't. I don't really follow them that much. You know.
Wasn't there like a 48 group in Hong Kong or something now?
Yeah, I think there's 48 group in Hong Kong. There's 48 groups in mainland China, India,
really,
Indonesia. They're everywhere.
Man, I knew they had like 6 of them in Japan, like one for every prefecture practically, like a bunch of them.
Yeah, well, you know, it's a money making machine for sure.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm surprised they don't have their own bank and print their own money.
They should just buy an island and form an AKB country.
There you go.
So you would say from the Western perspective, it's really just about a sensational aspect. Maybe similar to these Vocaloid stars, like what was her name? Hatsune Miku or something. So it's something different and then it's interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely something interesting and different. I think it's just so out of the ordinary for Western audiences that they're just not going to pay it any mind because to put it bluntly, it's too much effort to figure it out. You know, Western society is kind of lazy. If I'm being honest, we don't want to put forth too much effort figuring out, something that's happening in Japan musically, really.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think the majority of people just also there's kind of a stigma of the bands aren't real bands, they aren't real artists, whatever that means.
Yeah, I've never quite figured that out yet. Everybody just chalks it up to, oh, that's just weird Japan. They're so weird. Not really so weird, though. Not really. Yeah.
The weird Japan angle gets played up a lot. It's not all that freaking weird.
What is a normal band nowadays? I mean, in the West, we got people like Alice Cooper. He has also this sensational elements, his shock factor. He also didn't write the majority of his songs and he got popular. So.
Absolutely. We have our equivalents.
Definitely.
It's not an entirely unique thing. It's just, I'd say it's unique in the way that it's kind of matured in Japan and in Asia, but I don't think it's entirely unique to the East.
Nah, not at all. I mean, like was mentioned before. I mean, we've got the whole boy band thing that happened, in the 90s, which is really kind of the same thing.
We don't talk about this.
Backstreet Boys are back together. What do you mean?
They are. Backstreet's back. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, fuck.
Were there any points we didn't talk about for now about idol groups or?
I think we've covered most of the bases.
Yeah, I think we had a thorough coverage. Yeah.
So before we come to an end, maybe we get to you again in the sense of, I think we talked about it at the beginning for a short moment about Japanese music in general, because Zach said it's always interesting to know how does someone from America or from Europe get into Japanese music. And so do you also listen other Japanese music besides these idol groups? And if yes, which bands, which styles? So what's interesting to you?
I'd mentioned earlier in the show that I, went through a progression to get to where I am now. And I still do listen to a lot of all-female J-metal stuff. Aldius, Mary's Blood, Bright Ear, Galmet. I like all of these groups. I listen to them still frequently, along with all of the idol stuff, even some VK stuff. I like Nocturnal Bloodlust. I like Exist Trace. I listen to them still. Yeah. I listen to KPP still, or Kiai Pamu Pamu, if, people need me to spell it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
I like her.
I saw her live. It was great.
Nice. When I first got into Japanese music, it was 2 or 3 weeks after she was in Seattle the last time.
Oh.
So I missed that boat. What are you going
to do? You have to catch her, man. It was a lot of fun. I caught her in Chicago.
Maybe someday if I get over to Japan and she's still making music. Maybe.
Yeah, who knows? God, she's been fairly quiet.
Yeah.
Single here and there.
Yeah, but yeah, that's about it. Some female J metal, little pop. Other than that, it's all kinds of Idol all the time. It's probably irritating to my whole family because they are constantly listening to it.
Yeah, I make my friends listen to obscure Japanese indie bands and punk bands all the time. So,
I forgot. I like Mutant Monster too. They are great. You don't know Mutant Monster?
No.
Oh,
I'm sure we'll check them out.
you should. They're a three piece girl punk band. They've been around for a while. 2012, I think. They're actually gonna be in Europe later this next year.
Yeah, I'll have to check them out. They like hardcore, or are they more like classic, like Shonen Knife?
They're kind of like a pop punk.
So skate punk or something like this? Or?
Yeah. I mean, they're not screaming and yelling. They're actually singing, but it's your three chords punk type music.
It's a pretty big scene in Japan for these bands, Swanky Dank and many other bands. Yeah. Personally, with the Japanese punk scene, I'm not really familiar. I know the Stalin from way years back, but that's already it for me.
Yeah. There's a couple, I'm not too big into the punk scene, but I know, there's a couple out there like, who's Guitar Wolf, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I know Guitar Wolf.
I think the Strummers are considered a punk band, maybe. I don't know. That's really kind of out of my wheelhouse.
And into mine. But yeah, so thanks for coming on and talking about all this stuff. I guess you want to let everybody know again where we can find you.
Yeah, I can plug my stuff again.
Please do.
Let's see. We got I got my website straight-from-japan.com where I do news coverage of Alt Idol stuff. We've got the Alt Idol podcast, myself, Terry, and Gary. It was supposed to be a weekly podcast, but this is kind of a slow season, so we've moved to bi-weekly. Mm-hmm. And Gary and Terry are going to be in Japan starting on the 1st, so no podcasts for 3 weeks, I think.
How long are they staying there?
Terry's going to be there 10 days, and I think Gary is going to be there a month, maybe 20 days. I'm not sure.
In Tokyo?
Something like that. Yep, in Tokyo. Going to all the shows.
I'm going to Tokyo in November. I'll be getting there on the 22nd.
I will also link all the social media and website and YouTube channels in the description of the video. Make sure to check them out. Really cool stuff. And also for Zach, we said you are active on YouTube. You also do music, right?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a project. I do YouTube music reviews every Sunday, for the most part. Sometimes I skip one. You can also follow me on Twitter, where I complain about music all day. I'm at Aimborla, AIMBORLA. You can also just Google my name, Zach Reinhardt, ZACH REINHARDT, and you'll find me. I'm Googleable.
I think my viewers already know my social media channels, so go check them out. Yeah. Okay, straight from Japan and Alt Idol Podcast, road to 300 subscribers. I would say we make 500. Go over there, right?
I'm at 299 right now. What are you guys at?
So both of you need 300.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
At 299, it's just painful.
Challenge accepted.
And we're doing a giveaway at 500.
Oh boy.
I have a giant stack of CDs. I think it's 13 and growing.
Oh boy, plug that.
Yeah. It's international shipping gets you. I had to ship one to Spain. So.
Yeah.
First episode of Japanese Music Talk. I think we call it like this.
Well, if not that, something else.
You will find it in the title. yeah, thanks again to John for being our very first guest.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Well, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Maybe we can repeat it sometimes. It was really interesting to talk with you. And also, thanks to Zach for being my co-host.
Of course.
So, all that's left to say, thanks again for watching, and have a nice day.
Peace, guys.
Bye-bye.